Okay, this is the intro to the recording for the Friday night Bible study, the Sabbath Eve Bible study for December 21, 2018. I'll give the Hebrew date as soon as we go live. We'll be streaming live tonight on the Sabbath service page of Facebook Live, and this recording will go into the archive. And we'll begin just as soon. Oh, wait a minute. Let's line up the correct one. This is the opening one here. Just as soon as we get and Mr. Armstrong, I got him lined up with, quiz questions tonight. Let me explain that when we go live. We'll go live just as soon as we get a green light here from Facebook Live. All right, good evening, brethren, and welcome to the Friday evening Sabbath Eve Bible study here on cogtv.org, on Sabbath.tv channel. All right, I hope you like that music I'm opening with. I found that little MIDI thing on Shabbat Shalom, and seems like a good way to open up Friday night Bible study and Sabbath services too. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome to the start of the Sabbath on this Friday evening, this Sabbath Eve after sunset, and for the 14th day of the 10th month on God's holy sacred calendar. I always like to start with that because that is the calendar, the sacred calendar, the Hebrew calendar, is the calendar that Jesus Christ will be using once he returns to this earth, ushers in and restores the kingdom of God here. And you know, the picture I love of the description from Daniel about how Christ comes when he returns. He's pictured as coming as a rock, and he is, as mentioned in 1 Corinthians 10, the rock of our salvation and the rock of the Old Testament. He comes as a rock when he returns and smashes that statue that represents the Gentile governments of this world going back to the time of Daniel with the Chaldean Empire that was depicted by the head of that statue as a head of gold. Do I have that on a slide? Maybe we do. Hang on here a second. Let's roll through some of the visuals that we used for the nightly WorldWatch.tv news program, and just see if I've got. All right, now there's the Gentile kings. Actually, one of those, Napoleon. He's of the tribe of Reuben. But let's see that. But those kings are the five kings that are fallen, and the sixth king, the one that is, that's the last slide, this one and this one. That's not, I don't have that in here in this selection of slides, but there's wait a minute, I do have it on that one right there. Let me pull that forward. I think one of these, it doesn't go down low enough. The bottom row of this, there's 4 rows on this slide chain here, and we've got this shot set to only include the top 3 rows. On the bottom row, if we were able to see it all, there's a slide of a rock coming from heaven, smashing that statue of Daniel on the toes, representing Christ returning and ending smashing, destroying all the governments of this world, all of them. And there's hundreds of them today. The governments of each nation has its own government. When Christ returns, all of those governments will be wiped out and replaced with one government under the kingdom of God. I wish we had an audience and I could say, go ahead and give some bravos or applause or cheer. We had a live audience where you could hear the audience. But you yourself could be cheering, yay, one government where we won't have wars between nations anymore. And that'll be wonderful, a wonderful time that we're looking forward to. In the meantime, we have all kind of squabbles. This Thursday, the president of Russia gave his long chat. We'll be covering that Sunday night on news. I wasn't on Wednesday and Thursday this week with World Watch friends because I spent those 2 days, long hours on the roof after having, I did the program Sunday, Monday, Tuesday night, the World Watch News program. By the way, Bob, hello. Thank you for your prayers. I am praying for you. Bob, I'm just going to mention your first name now, and I'm not going to mention the particular circumstances you asked me specifically to pray about, but unless you and I talk more and you tell me it's all right if I mention that, I do want to tell you about one or two other fellows in a similar situation to yourself. But the main thing I wanted to say to Bob is that not only am I keeping up the prayers for you, Bob, but I sure appreciate having heard back from you that you let me know that you're praying for me as I ask you to do. Let's exchange those prayers. And that Bob let me know that he appreciates the live streams for the Friday night Bible study and the Sabbath services, emphasizing importance on that. He said, if you have to miss anything, miss the World Watch. Don't miss these things. And I appreciate that, Bob. It's actually had me prioritize that way. And I remembering your words to me, I about 1 hour ago, I had planned, while I was laying down taking a nap, I had come in here and set up things to be ready for tonight. While I was setting them up, I was feeling so exhausted, and just how you can feel sick. When you're exhausted, you can just have a sick feeling. I had a sick feeling come over me, and my left knee that still is healing slowly. God's letting it heal slowly, so I can maybe learn something and empathize with you more. With those of you that have sufferings, whatever. It's healing slowly, and it's healing faster when I stay off of it, like I was advised to do by a sports director. He said, stay off that knee, Stephen, until it heals. Well, if I stayed off this knee, if I stayed off of it, a lot of things would not get done that have to be done. So I have to be up on it some. And because of trying to get as much done as I can with the roof until I get some certain financing I'm arranging, and it looks like that's going to go. I'll just share that with you openly. I'm working on a reverse mortgage. I got a paid-for house I can apply that against, and and there's good reason to go with that, and so that's in the works. But in the meantime, I still got a leaking roof that I put plastic up on it, and I did that last year and held off the rain for a while. This year, even my plastic's not working. And the roofer I had up there, even today, I've had roofers on that roof every day this week, and even on the prep day, because last night I had rain leaking down on my face while I was in my bed, an all-night rain. And finally, here comes the rain down one of the leak spots. Hits me right in the face. So I already learned I've got this rubberized sheet. I just pull it over my head, prop it up so I can breathe, and let the water accumulate on that rubber sheet, mattress type sheet. And what was I? So I had a roofer come on out today, And I was, beside giving me another estimate and what he felt would be best thing to do, he's one of the best that I've found so far. I was hoping he would maybe help me do something that would, stop. Now, tonight there's no rain predicted for tonight. Thank you, dear Lord, for the Sabbath. We've got a predicted clear day, no rain, but we had last 2 days solid rain here in Alabama. Sunday it's predicted to be raining again. And Monday we have a little break in it. Yeah, and then the rest of the week it's predicted to have solid rain again. But the roofer, and like Lillian, I think, told me, said you got to have a roofer nail down that plastic. I've got it up there with concrete blocks. These are heavy construction concrete blocks. I don't think any wind's going to blow those construction blocks off. If we had a wind strong enough to blow those off, we'd be having another kind of a problem. It'd be almost like a tornado type problem. But the roofer told me I need to have one solid piece of tarp instead of the 4 different separate, big, wide, long sheets of plastic that I have up there. But I did do some stuff in the attic today, following some suggestions this roofer made that I pushed in there that hopefully will help. Anyway, I don't want to get too far off on that. I've got that in works. I got another estimate from this guy and several from several others, and I can give it to any one of them as soon as I've got that reverse mortgage money finalized. And they make me do certain counseling that I even got one scheduled for Monday, and you have to pay for it and do the counseling for those reverse mortgages. And then what is it? Let's see. And then Thursday they're sending out a notary, and I have to have 4 documents and notarize their paperwork. And once that's in place, I can pay one of these guys to just fix that roof. That'll be good. But I was so exhausted, I went and lay down for an hour. I was planning on putting up a sign, Bob, that said, friends, I'm sorry, but I'm exhausted. I'm feeling sick. I'm going to go to bed early tonight. And after laying down for a half hour or so, I remembered your words, and I was beginning to feel a little better. I do as Mr. Armstrong does, and I ask God, will you please give me that strength, like Mr. Armstrong talks about, that Isaiah asked you for in Isaiah 30, verse 49. I think that's where it is. Mr. Armstrong reminds often he had to do that. He would ask God to give that strength that God would give to Isaiah. And Mr. Armstrong gave witness and testimony that God would do that for him. What did I say? Isaiah 30, verse 49, or have I got it backward? Let me see. Isaiah 30... let's just see what verse 49 is. Well, I must have it backward. There isn't 49 verses in Isaiah 30. So let's go to Isaiah 49 and verse 30. It seemed like at verse 29 somewhere. That's not it, because that's... 40. I think it's Isaiah 40, 29. I want to find that because I've been asking God for it. And it's good to review the scriptures once in a while. For what you had. Oh, here it is. It's in 40:29. Isaiah 40:29. God gives power to the faint, and to them that have no might, he increases strength. So and verse 31 is good too. And verse 30, even the youths shall faint and be weary. The youth shall faint and be weary. And the young men shall utterly fail. But, verse 31, they that wait upon the eternal Lord God shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. So all of that section of Isaiah 40 that Mr. Armstrong said he used to call on God for when he would, be struggling and dealing with a lot of things and just physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, emotionally exhausted, he would call on God for that strength. And so I'm doing that, brother, and God, after just half hour, and Mr. Armstrong would remind me that he would take naps every day. In fact, one day when he and I were just talking alone, and I said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about something." He said, "Well, I need to go up and take we were in a hotel together in Jerusalem, down in the lobby, and he said, "Well, I need to go take my afternoon nap. So it'll have to be after I have my nap, Stephen." Oh, okay, good. And I investigated naps after Mr. Armstrong told me that. I said, "Hey, there's power in taking a nap." And so I had a little nap. I'm a little stronger. So, Bob, I'm up. And again, thank you for your prayers, any of you that are praying for me. I'll appreciate it if you mention Isaiah 40, 29, 30, 31. Isaiah chapter 40 and verses 29, 30, 31 to God and say, "Hey, God, give Stephen that strength he's asking us to pray for him, as you would do Mr. Armstrong, as you did for Isaiah." And I'll try to keep this up. I did want to mention this to Bob and to the rest of you, that when I first agreed to take over this hot seat, when I used to be on the other side of the camera, running the cameras, running the on-air switching controls for Bob Collins, when Bob Collins originally was hosting this program in this seat, I was very happy that way. But as he got where his strength was going, and God decided that was it for him, that he was going to let him die during the Feast of Tabernacles. He died after the feast was over on the way home in the car, but during the feast, I asked him, I said, "Well, are you going to be ready after the feast to get back and, continue these programs?" We were doing World Watch Nightly News program then, only we did it under the name of Nightcast at that time. And Mr. Collins was hosting these weekend Sabbath services. I don't know if we were not doing Friday night Bible studies then, but he would do the Sabbath services on the Sabbath. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, you ready to get back to the live streams?" And I was surprised at his response and answer, although he had been very ill during the feast even, and throwing up a lot, and then throwing up blood. And one of the minister's wives where we were that year said to me, "Steve, when we left after the end of the last great day, she put a bug in my ear and said, get plenty of Pedialyte or something with, what's the substance? Pedialyte has electrolytes, something with a lot of electrolytes in it." And she says, that'll help. But she says, the factors and indicators, as she could see it and understood it, was that, and he had been anointed by one of their ministers there during that feast, but she said, he's not going to, and they kind of understood God was going to let him go. She said to me, he's not going to make it back to Alabama alive. He's not going to make it home alive. I was glad that because somehow God let her see that, I was glad to have that bug put in my ear ahead of time, because then I wasn't as shocked. The doctor who looked at him when we got back said that he had died about an hour or two, whatever he told me, before we came into emergency at the hospital in my hometown area, which meant he died just after we passed over the Mississippi state line. Yeah, because he said he had died about an hour ago, was his prognosis from however they do that, temperature and what all. But what he said to me, Ray and I, who were swapping driving, we drove all through the night, and we wanted to be back home with him if he was going to die that night. So we drove all night instead of getting a motel and sleeping and driving the next day. That it's against the law to put a person who has died in your car, at least in this state. Because I tried to get them to put him back in the car after they told me at the hospital that, he had died and was not revivable, because I had instructions from him as to the funeral home he wanted to be taken to and how he was to be buried. And and that there wouldn't be a viewing for him. He wanted it done in a cost-saving manner, which I wound up paying for, but out of my pocket, but which was okay. But he had already prearranged all that, and it saved several $1,000s the way he wanted it done. But it has to be done within 24 hours from the time of their death. And so I said to the doctor, I said, okay, well, have your people put him back in the car. I'll drive him over to the funeral home. He said, no, state law, we can't put a dead person in your car. I kind of argued with him at first. I said, well, he was dead when I brought him here, so what's the difference? Put him back. I'm going to drive him straight to the funeral home. Nope, can't do it. And, you can call the funeral home, have them come and get him. I did that. That cost me, I had to pay them $400 ambulance fee to have them, take him over there. But, and then I had to go there anyway to pay them the money. So I was a little bit unhappy about that. But Mr. Collins had said, I didn't mean to get to too many details on that, friends, but that was an emotional thing for me. And a little bit of relief sharing that with you. But during the feast, several days before he died, I'd said to Mr. Collins, you ready to get back and, get back on the live streaming? And the comment he made that I was kind of surprised to hear, surprised, and it revealed something to me. It prepared me for the minister's wife's words when she said he's not going to make it home alive. I began to realize, when Mr. Collins said to me, when I asked him, you ready to get back? He said, I'm tired. Stephen, I'm tired. And if God has finished what he's doing with a person, and he's not going to give them the energy they need for it, or, it could well be that God wanted to make a transition from Mr. Collins being in the seat to me, which, we had already had some discussion along the lines of, that I would commit to keeping this going after Mr. Collins died. And I kind of, for a while, thought that would mean I could just find some minister somewhere who would want to do this, older, long experienced minister, and I'd stay behind the camera and help him do this, help him do the World Watch programs. And after about 6 months of me asking men who I was in college with who went straight out into the field ministry, or, as in the case of Aaron Dean, went straight to work for Mr. Armstrong. Mr. Armstrong stopped Aaron Dean from going out into the field ministry, which he was scheduled to do, and said, Aaron, I want you to report to me on Monday morning. I want you to come work for me and, fly on the airplane with me and be the host on the airplane, on the G2. At that time, it was the G2 before they upgraded to a G3. And Aaron's words, some of you may have heard, were funny about that, where he said, well, Mr. Armstrong, I'm supposed to report out to so-and-so in a certain state and city, to be a trainee in the field ministry. He says, and Aaron said to Mr. Armstrong, he said, you want me to report? Do you think you think that'll be all right, Mr. Armstrong? said I'd come and work for you on the G2 and instead of reporting like I've been assigned to do. And I'm laughing ahead of time. I should tell you what Mr. Armstrong said first. Mr. Armstrong responded to Aaron. Excuse me a second. Let me turn that off. Mr. Armstrong responded to Aaron in a way, when Aaron tells it, it's kind of funny. Mr. Armstrong responds to Aaron by saying, well, Aaron, I think that'll probably be all right, or I think that'll be all right. And the reason that's funny is because Mr. Armstrong, at the head of the work, as the pastor general, he can certainly reassign people, make changes, and, Aaron was just asking him off the cuff. I mean, Aaron had been looking forward to going out to the field ministry assignment. He'd hoped for that for a long time and was looking forward to it. Now, and of course, it was a surprise for him getting that call from Mr. Armstrong saying, I want you to come and work for me on the G2. And it was both a surprise and an elevating, nice way. Work for the chief, work for the pastor general, the chief, humanly of the work, pastor general. But not in, it wouldn't, but to begin with, that would not be in a ministerial training thing. But if you're working for the pastor general, that's a very unique kind of a training. And so Aaron's response was probably a little defensive in a way. Hey, I want to go, work in the field ministry and eventually, become minister and all that, which he did after working for Mr. Armstrong for years. But he said, I'm supposed to do this. Do you think that'll be all right? And Mr. Armstrong said, well, I think that'll be, all right, Aaron. Since, I'm the pastor general, I think that'll be all right. Anyway, that's been funny to me. I hope by sharing that with you, you get a little enjoyment out of that. Now, all right, what was I going to say to you here? What are we doing tonight? All right. I'm kind of I've got something I want to show you a few minutes of that I'm going to play for you in the morning of Mr. Armstrong speaking. It's one I played last week, maybe a little bit the week before too. You're going to feel like, I've heard this a lot. But the way I've got this done with the quiz worked into it, I've got it smoother than we've had it before. And I'd like to hear some feedback from some of you, and I'd like to see maybe some response to it when we do it in the morning. But I want to show you just a little bit of it tonight. If you like the way we're doing that and say, hey, that does help keep me awake. It does make me listen more carefully. And yeah, Stephen, keep that up. Let's keep Mr. Armstrong speaking to us. There are too many out there who are watering down what Mr. Armstrong taught and trying to explain certain things away and compromising that, we need to hear Mr. Armstrong and do as God tells us to do, where he had Paul speaking to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 1, verse 10, where he said he encouraged us to all be speaking the same thing, and there's only one way that's going to come about, and that's if we're listening to, to one through whom God sets doctrine in the church. And only an apostle can set doctrine, and God arranged it so that there would only be one apostle for the building of the Philadelphia era for at least 50 years, and now well beyond 50 years, so that there wouldn't be this and that in the church. There would be, the doctrine is this, and nobody can... But no one but an apostle can set doctrine. And since Mr. Armstrong has died, there's been no new true apostle. Now, there's one that claimed falsely to be an apostle, but he was an apostle, all right, but a false apostle. But there's the only true apostle we've had in the church has been Mr. Armstrong, and he's been the only one with the authority to set doctrine. And what he set, there's no one God has put in position who can change the doctrines that have been left with us since Mr. Armstrong has died. And those doctrines are good. God corrected any errors in the doctrine, and they're good. There are even some freedoms given in one of the doctrines, as God revealed how God himself backed up Paul in what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 7, that gives a certain freedom to brethren in marriages who have been abused, and that's only for the church. That's specifically, and the person that's given that freedom, if they remarry, it has to be to someone in the faith. And if they leave someone in a marriage, or the other way around, if that person in a marriage leaves you, that's the only way you're really free for that remarriage, that freedom. from an abusive, being abandoned type of situation. Now, since I'm into that subject, you might leave if you've been abused, but that abusing person is showing that they're not pleased to dwell with you. But that's a whole subject by itself. But that was a doctrine that gave us what God bound with the New Testament church through Paul's writing, which is an exception that he made to what Christ said, would only for these certain things. But there's a little tiny wall of exception for where fraud is involved. A lot of people have taken wrongful advantage of that, and they're going to pay some consequences. They're going to have to answer to Jesus Christ. You didn't do this the way we bound it through Paul and Mr. Armstrong. But let me get to this verse here. Verse 10, 1 Corinthians 1. Now and in saying that, let's see, Bob, without saying too much, let me just address you for a second. You're doing well. We do need to talk about 1 Corinthians 7 sometime. If for a person who's in a situation where you're married to a mate, where your mate is not in the church, but you are already married, you didn't unequally bind yourself, because when you married them, maybe you weren't in the church, but then you come in, God brings you into the church, but not your mate. 1 Corinthians 7 tells us that if your unconverted mate is pleased to dwell with you, you don't leave them. You can't leave them. And even though they may give you a hard time once in a while about your religion, but if overall they're pleased to dwell with you and they learn to kind of be quiet about that, and your example to them is above and beyond, is above board, eventually, like 1 Corinthians 7 says, you, by your good conduct, may win over the unconverted person. And, of course, that you in the process of that, you may have to very, very patiently endure through a lot of things while your mate's not on the same mind as you. You want to go home and discuss certain things with your mate, and share it back and forth, and they're not of that mind. Well, you have to learn to kind of zip it and just share it yourself and pray, bring your prayers before God, and she won't always understand, but you set a good example, and she or he, your unconverted mate can be won over. We'll do 1 Corinthians 7 sometime, but 1 Corinthians 1, verse 10, I beseech you now, brethren, by the name, which means by the authority of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you all speak the same thing, and that there be no divisions among you. Now, does that mean no banana peeling, vanity plate Church of God groups? No divisions among you, but that you be perfectly joined together in the same mind and in the same judgment. And by having one apostle, that's a way we can more effectively fulfill this instruction, this doctrine, that you all speak the same thing, brethren, and that there be no divisions among you. So we're going to pay attention to the apostle. Excuse me, brethren, and the doctrines that God set and left with us through this man before he died, who continues to speak as if it were from the grave because of the way God has preserved his writings, his publications, and his speaking in Bible studies, sermons, radio broadcasts, telecast, enough to keep us listening and busy for a long time. Now, I do want to keep this short tonight because I do, in spite of the fact that I asked God for some strength and energy, I do, with all that I wound up having to do this week, I do want to get to bed early tonight. There are some things I have to do after a live stream to get it into the archive for people that watch, as many do, after we've done a live stream, at a time on demand meaning at any moment you want to hit the button and listen to a recording. I have to upload it to the Vimeo and YouTube channels. Now it automatically loads itself and stays in Facebook and is there a few minutes after we sign off. But there are more people actually that watch not on Facebook than there are on Facebook. So the Vimeo crowd, the YouTube crowd, I have to do some stuff to upload it to each of those channels, and it takes some time to get those up there and index it and do all the right coding and what have you for those. So it keeps me up a while after a program. And being that I didn't get to do more than this one during the week with the quiz, I'm just going to show you 2 of the quiz questions with Mr. Armstrong speaking, and then I'll play the whole thing in the morning for the Sabbath service, AM to the U.S., PM to the U.K. And let me get this out of the way, and we'll bring Mr. Armstrong full screen forward. Oh, let me see. Wait a minute. I need to, when I bring him forward, I need to bring him forward on another screen so that it's full screen like this. Okay. Now, let me just play you just 2 or 3 minutes, maybe just a minute or two, and let you see how I plan to restructure the quiz part of this. So we're not playing the whole thing. I'm just going to play enough for you to see 2 of the quiz questions, how the new way I'm doing this will work. All right, Mr. Armstrong, if you will, sir, go ahead with, let's see, let me just put his name up for a moment. Go ahead, sir, with this first few minutes of your sermon excerpt.
But when God created man, let me give you an example. When God first created man, he only created the physical man. And that was not a finished creation. After that must come the spiritual creation, and the real purpose of God was to produce or reproduce his own self.
Okay, now, brother, hang on here a second with me. I see that I have selected the wrong thing because it's cut off some of the lettering. And I thought that was supposed to be it right there, that one. But let's see, do we have another one that's got the whole thing? It didn't save right. Oh, nope, that's not it. I'm glad I figured this out tonight, so we'll have it for the morning. Okay, here. This one. Now let's switch over. Let's bring him out and switch over to this one. Okay, now that's the one I need to use. That's got the entire question. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm good. It's a good thing we're doing this tonight. All right, so the first question is bonus question 1. Okay, I didn't realize. I thought there was another question before that. Oh, we're starting kind of in the middle of this. All right, so we're starting with bonus question for our little test here. Bonus 1, the real purpose of God was what? Now, he just answered that question, and I kind of interrupted him. But if you were listening, you heard that, the real purpose of God. There's going to be a couple of things he says. Now, I don't want to say the answer tonight because when you listen to this in the morning, when I play it in a normal manner, I want to see if you're paying attention for yourself. I mean, you can answer this in the comments if you'd like to, and if there are other people on live with us when we do it, that could be fun to see, hey, who gets it first or who gets the answer. You can even respond if you're doing it from a recording when we're not live. You can still comment and say, hey, I know what he said, blah, blah, blah. And then it'd be fun to go back and look later and see, who or how many got them. Let's play the next one. Let's see if wrong button, get this back over. Well, I've just blacked this out here. Hang on, I'll get it back. Okay, there we go. Let's go on with the next part of this. Mr. Armstrong will speak, and then We'll have a second question in just a moment. Here we go.
And instill within man his holy and righteous character. Now, God set before the angels, for example, his own way, his own truth, but they didn't follow it.
All right, now listen, pay real close attention in the next minute because the next question will be popping up, and just see if you can answer it from listening closely now to Mr. Armstrong.
God set before Adam, the first man, his way and his purpose in man, and what man's ultimate fantastic potential really is. But Adam had to resist Satan, and he didn't do it. He rejected God. Well, I'm coming to that a little later. But God first put angels on this earth. Very few people realize that before man, angels had inhabited this earth.
Okay, brother, and here comes another question, and that question is, you just heard him give the answer to this. Before man, what kind of beings inhabited this earth? Now, you'd have had to really be asleep not to be able to get the answer to this. You should be able to say, well, he just said, blank inhabited this earth before man. Starts with an A. You know, even if you hadn't heard Mr. Armstrong's word, you should probably be able to guess that and answer that one. All right, but now I saw something come up that I'm going to need to make a change on. Let me just come out for a minute. All right, so I want to do it now because if I wait till after we're off the air, I might not be able to find the one that we were just using. And there's a button I'm going to need to check. Well, that's funny. It's not checked on this one. All right. There's a BBC credit coming up because this is one of the shots I use for BBC. Well, hang on a second. Let me check and see. Let me slide this back out. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the wrong one. I could go to 37 instead of 40. All right, but if we change it in 40, okay, let's see, shot 43. Okay. All right, I see where I need to change it. It's shot number 43. And I need to uncheck that box for the BBC credits. Okie dokie. All right, good. We got that. We got that, brethren. I got that fixed for in the morning. And that's what we'll do. Do you see how I'm doing that? Mr. Armstrong pauses while the question pops on the screen in front of him. And when he's speaking, and I'm not in the shot, you can see the whole question. It spreads out where you can see the whole question. And that question for, this part of it, before man, what kind of beings inhabited this earth? All right, and then Mr. Armstrong will speak again for a minute, and then there will be another question. Let's see, where are we in time? Let me show you one more. I'm going to play the whole thing in the morning without interrupting it, although I may pop in and just read the question. But let's go on for just till he gets to the next question. All right, this was question 3, and next question would be number 4.
But as you will read in 2 Peter, the 2nd chapter and the 4th verse, the angels sinned.
All right, now this one pops up real quick. Where does the Bible say that angels sinned? Well, the scripture's on the screen, and when it starts back up, it's still up there on the screen for you. That's the answer to that question. Where does it say in the Bible angels sin? Well, there it is, right there, 2 Peter 2, verse 4. So when you see, if you're with us in the morning, when I play this whole thing and you see that one, well, you already know, well, just look right there. There's the Bible, there's the chapter and verse that answers the question of where does it say in the Bible that angels sinned? Well, it's right there, 2 Peter 2, verse 4. And sometimes there's more space in between questions. Sometimes there's a lot. I got, for this particular section, I think I have something like 30 questions, and this section's only maybe 10 minutes long. So I'm really making sure, even within 10 minutes, that you're staying awake. That's part of the purpose when Mr. Armstrong is speaking, and to realize that in a short space of time, the man whom God trained in over 50 years of struggling with doing the work and producing Plain Truth magazines every month, and for many years the Good News magazine, and keeping up a daily radio broadcast and a weekly television broadcast, and then on top of that, visiting kings and princes around the world as God opened up that commission to, bring a message and warning and announcement that when Christ returns, he would be ushering in and restoring the give way instead of the get way, and then it would be a good thing. All right, brethren, I'm going to stop there for tonight. Give us all a break. The weather's turned extra cold here where I am, maybe where you are. You'd appreciate being able to say some prayers before you go to bed. Thank God for a roof over your head. Excuse me if I make a joke out of this, but thank God for a roof over your head that doesn't leak. Thank God for, if you're in a cold area, for heaters and heat. And, for people in this area, if you're poor and you don't have money, of course, and it's a national program called LIHEAP, L-I-H-E-A-P. I've even ran to them and used it before myself. When I found out they did that and I was in, financial need, I went and took advantage of it. So, if you are, if your money is tight, in every county and every state, they have places where you can go apply to a program the federal government does twice a year in the summer to provide you with cooling, and in the winter to provide you with heat. Now, not that I'm for this on a national long-time basis, but it's nice for some people that are in a situation where you need that, and they interview you, and you got to meet the qualifications of actual need at the time. But, there's no reason why anybody should be suffering cold. You can go get help to have utilities, to have heat. And that's something you can thank God for, that, you've got the means and the way to have some heat, have a roof over your head, have a nice bed to sleep in, have peace in your community, protection, safety, food on your table in the morning, that you have a Bible and God's Word, and that even while we're scattered, we have resources you can go to who hold fast as we were taught, as God instructs the ministry in Titus 1, verse 9. To the ministry, God says, hold fast and teach as you were taught. Now, the exact words he uses, let me just go over that with all of us here. Because, brethren, you should, if you're going someplace and they're irritating you because they're compromising this and that, and you find out, wow, it's causing me to just lax down instead of being hot, and following Christ's instruction in Luke 21:36. And if you're watching for the first time and you're saying, well, what is that? Well, ask one of the people that tune in here regularly, and they'll tell you, Steve thumps that Luke 21:36 all the time. He likes to drive us crazy with that. Well, I hope so, brethren. I hope it'll inspire you to follow it, because that contains instruction that, even though some ministers out there, I'm sad and ashamed to tell you, poo-poo it and say, well, it didn't work while Mr. Armstrong was alive, so we don't have to do it now. Some of the stuff people that have been ordained in ministry say, I can hardly believe. That's speaking directly against the words of and instruction of Jesus Christ, who said in Luke 21:36, watch, and he wasn't talking there about your conduct. He mentions that in verse 34 of Luke 21, where he says, take care to yourselves, that you don't become overcharged with surfeiting or drunkenness or the cares of this world. And in Luke 4:4 and Matthew 4:4, Christ tells us we have to live by every word of God, which includes the commands of God. But Luke 21:36 goes over and above that, with Jesus Christ saying, you need to follow not just the commands of my Father, which I follow, Christ, which Jesus Christ himself followed and set an example in keeping and in observing. But he says in Luke 21:36, you also need to follow the instruction that I, Jesus Christ, am giving you if you want to be accounted worthy to stand before me, the Son of Man, in the first resurrection, and preceding that by 3.5 years, if you want to be accounted worthy to escape the next major event in prophecy. If you want to stand worthy to escape, let's punch it up here on the screen, the Great Tribulation, which that's seal number 5, and that, as Mr. Armstrong explained it, is the next major event coming in prophecy. Let me punch that closer for a moment. And the thing he's saying, watch, he was just explaining all the seals of Revelation 6 in plain language in Luke 21 and in the parallel chapters of Matthew 24, Mark 13, he was doing the same. But there in verse 36 of Luke 21, after he's explained these seals in plain language, he pauses at a juncture between the first 4 seals and the 5th seal to say, watch these first 4 that are the only of the 7 seals that are active now, so that you can be accounted worthy to escape the 5th through the 7th seal, beginning with the 5th seal, Great Tribulation, which Christ described in verse 20 of Matthew 24 as the greatest trouble, the greatest time of trouble since the beginning of the world to this time coming, and never ever after shall be. Then what's coming in this Great Tribulation just ahead of us? Let's read that verse just as Christ said it in Matthew 24, verse 20. And, brethren, I actually had someone complain about something one time, and we do get, every time there's a purpose for including Mr. Armstrong speaking as often as I can, preferably, every week, to have Mr. Armstrong speaking. Every week, night, morning, Friday night Bible study, Sabbath Eve Bible study, Sabbath morning services, so we can stay close to the words of the apostle and not compromise them, be reminded of them. And there are so many recordings, thankfully, that you've caused those to be preserved, Father, as you've opened up a new medium, a new door, the medium of the Internet, World Wide Web. And Mr. Armstrong there, preserved in them, and his writings too. But as Christ was, and Mr. Armstrong has explained what I'm just telling you right now, that's the next major event in prophecy, which has not come yet, in spite of some out there who've tried to claim the 2 witnesses are already here, the Laodicean era is already here. No, it's not. God's end-time apostle explained that the Laodicean era comes after this next major event in prophecy comes after this 5th seal Great Tribulation opens up. And when this opens up, this is the time when Philadelphia, those who are accounted worthy in Philadelphia, are flown on 2 wings of a great eagle, Revelation 12, verse 14, to a place in the wilderness that God has prepared, Daniel 11:41, a tri-regional area in the east of the Jordan River, from Ammon in the top, Moab in the middle, Edom in the south, with the entranceway to that being Petra, that has the 2 rock walls that reminded him of the Red Sea being gelled up when ancient Israel had to run through there being chased by Pharaoh's army, or had to march through there. And a similar thing described in Revelation 12 after verse 14, with the devil himself sending an army against modern Israel, against those accounted worthy to escape the devil sends a flood, an army. And it's just like ancient Israel being chased through the Red Sea. Those accounted worthy to escape are chased through the mountains range of Petra with the big rock walls. And then God opens up the earth and swallows that army just the same way he swallowed the army of Pharaoh, chasing ancient Israel, letting the gelled up walls of the Red Sea come crashing down upon them. And as he opens up the earth, earthquake, he's probably going to have some of that, those rock walls at Petra come crashing down into the hole where that army is and make sure they are mercifully, immediately killed and extinguished. And those accounted worthy to escape are protected, brought on into that wilderness area that Daniel 11:41 mentions as the only place on the face of the earth that's outside the reach of the beast, the one who is the beast, the king, the emperor of the revived Holy Roman Empire for its seventh and final time, which is the beast power of this fifth seal, which when this fifth seal opens up with the Great Tribulation, that's when that seventh king of Revelation 17:10, that's when that beast revives the Holy Roman Empire and has dominion over the whole world except for that tri-regional area mentioned in Daniel 11:41, a wilderness where God flies those who are counted worthy to escape, those who were watching these first four seals daily and praying without ceasing about them. That's the second part of Luke 21:36, that Christ has instructed those who want to escape the tribulation and who want to stand before the Son of Man in the first resurrection, which you have to be called to. You have to be called to Christ during the spring harvest to be able to stand before the Son of Man in the first resurrection. And if you want that, you can ask God to call you to it. And those of you that grew up in the church who are 1 Corinthians 7 kids or church kids, Mr. Armstrong has explained from 1 Corinthians 7 that you're not cut off from God the way the rest of the world is, but you have to want it. And if you don't tell God, I want this, then God will leave you like the rest of the kids of the world to come up in the second resurrection. You miss that 1,000-year millennium opportunity. But if you want it that way, you can skip it. Be called in second resurrection. 1 Corinthians 7 kids, church kids, are in a very unique category. Those who were not raised in the church, and by raised in the church, I mean have at least one parent who was in the church when you were a kid. If you're not in that category, like many of the rest of us who God called into the church later in our lives, after we were no longer a kid, but, you were in early adult ages or sometimes even in advanced adult ages. But those who were not church kids and God called, in some cases, we began to see something. In my case, I began to see, hey, wait a minute. God said, I will build my church. And as God was calling me, he was putting it in my mind to see if I really wanted it. And yes, I did. I responded to it like, hey, where is that church Christ said he would build? I grew up in this Protestant church, certain Protestant church, and yet there were other kinds of Protestant churches right across the street and down the street and a few blocks away, and the Catholic church over here, and all these Protestant daughters over there, different types, different denominations. Why all that, Father? You said you'll build your church. Well, which one of these is it, if it's any of these? Oh, it looks like it's not any of these, because Sabbath, and wait a minute, the Jews, they're not exactly the church Christ was building, so where is this church? And he got me to really wanting to know, where is that church? And when he answered me by I don't think I ever heard a broadcast by Mr. Armstrong before, but God answered that prayer when I was saying, for 3 weeks, staying up all night after going to the woods all day and reading the Gospels and the Psalms and other parts of the Bible and trying to figure out, where is that church? How can I clue in and find that church? And I just kept pleading with God to show me, where is your church? And I tell you one thing for sure, answered prayer is a real thing. And God answered it by causing me to hear this man. As I'm tuning in, just listening to what was then called good music, some nice relaxing, well-orchestrated music on the radio, about 6 o'clock one evening. I'm preparing that I'm going to bug God to pieces tonight. I'm going to keep asking him, where is that church that he said Christ would build, till he answers me. And I was relaxing so that I'd have the strength to be praying that night, but I was becoming exhausted, because after 3 weeks of doing that every night, I was just getting exhausted. And so I'm listening to some relaxing music to try to help me relax a little bit. And it's still on my mind, though. I wanted to know, where is that church? And then, boom, the music is interrupted with da-da-da, 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 boom, boom, boom. And this man's voice coming forward and asking the very questions I had been asking in prayer for the past 3 weeks. Where is that church Jesus Christ is building, and why a church on every corner? And what are we doing here on this earth anyway? Why did you create man physical? And he starts out with those kind of questions at the beginning of his broadcast. The exact questions I had been asking in prayer was the questions he asked at the opening of his broadcast that night. And I was like, whoa. Here is coming forth not only the very questions I was asking in prayer, but, man, this voice you've sent to me on the radio, Father, of this man is giving me some of the answers to those questions. Or at least he's telling me he's thinking the same thing I'm thinking. And he's got the answers. And he's your baby, God. He's your man. Or, for me. And so Billy Graham immediately stopped receiving my tithe money, and, well, half of it anyway. At first I split it up. I sent Billy Graham half, sent Mr. Armstrong the other half. And then it wasn't long, though, after a few nights, I'm sending everything to Mr. Armstrong. I had a little business that worked from my home that produced income, and I cut Billy Graham off after a little bit, just giving him half, and Mr. Armstrong got it all, because I said, hey, this is it. These are the answers I'm looking for. And I knew God sent that voice, that man to me. I didn't know there was a church behind it for a long time. I went on into the military, and after 2.5 years in the military of continuing to listen to the broadcast daily and read the Plain Truth magazine, I called, and a minister came to see me and had me told me I'd need to request the book on military service and war, which I did, and that led to my getting out a little earlier after 2.5 years in the Coast Guard. And that enabled me to apply to Ambassador College, which his speaking about it had sold me on. I got to come earlier than I would have if I had just stayed in my 4 years enlistment. And the rest is history. All right, brethren, I want to keep this, instead of hour and a half, I'm just a few minutes over an hour. I want to go ahead and sign us off for tonight. We'll pick up with what I've prepared with those questions. I hope you like the way I'm doing that. Shall I just give you one more? No, I want to go ahead and shut it off. You saw at least three, I think, that had the questions pop up while Mr. Armstrong is speaking. And we'll play the whole thing for the Sabbath morning service in the U.S. It'll be p.m. in the U.K., and I know some of you grabbed this Friday night Bible study early, but tune in again later with us. Some of you wanted me to have the live stream on before the sun sets on the Sabbath in the UK. I accommodate you on that by getting up at an hour here in Alabama when I would like to be sleeping on Sabbath morning, and get this on at 9:30 a.m. Central Time in Alabama time, which works out to be about 2:30 in the afternoon in the UK, which was the time we started services at headquarters in Pasadena for many years, 2:30 p.m. And so that's when it comes on in the UK. Still well before the Sabbath and a good time. 9:30 here, though, in the U.S. and Alabama. It's 7:30 on the West Coast. Bad time for you guys who, I know want to be in bed, but the archive, it's in the archive. When you get up, you just turn it on whenever you want to watch it if you're on the West Coast. East Coast, it's probably a good time. 10:30, that was the time for the morning services in Pasadena, in the auditorium and in the Imperial Gym. For the morning service congregations, 10:30 a.m. So that's what time we'll be on the East Coast in the morning. So until then, brethren, I want to wish you a good Sabbath night rest, some prayer before God before you crawl into that nice warm bed, and a good night's sleep. And God willing, and a good night's sleep. I'll look forward to seeing you Sabbath morning. So until then, let me back out of here. Mr. Armstrong will be back with us with what he's doing, and let me play that closing music we have. I'm playing the theme that Mr. Armstrong closed his World Tomorrow telecast with for a long time. We'll close out with that, and I'll say Shabbat Shalom. See you in the morning. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.